The Annapolis campaign season's in full swing, so on June 28th, we'll be hosting an Annapolis mayoral debate. Come on, this is serious.
What?
Really, is this the best you can do? Best song?
Okay, all right.
The Annapolis campaign season is in full swing, so on June 28th, we will be hosting an Annapolis mayoral debate. Okay, this is stupider.
Stupider? It's not even a word.
Can we just get this done, please?
Okay. You know what? Hold on. Got it. Start over.
Okay. The Annapolis campaign season's in full swing, so on June 28th, we'll be hosting an Annapolis mayoral debate that... Damn it, John! No, wait, I like this. No, keep rolling. We're bringing all 4 mayoral candidates to Ram's Head on stage on Wednesday, June 28th for the first forum with all 4 candidates. It's free and the doors will open at 6 p.m. with the forum beginning right at 7. No free food, but Ram's Head on stage will have food and drink available for purchase.
And on the technical end, we will be recording it for a podcast, and if the internet gods are smiling on us, we'll be broadcasting it live on Facebook on the All Annapolis and Maryland Crabs Facebook pages.
Wait, I thought you didn't know anything about this.
Shut up, it's a promo. Just read the script.
But we need your help. If you have a topic or question for the candidates, please drop us an email at info@themarylandcrabs.com.
Or you can feel free to tweet us at MDCrabsPodcast, or leave us a message or a comment on Facebook.
So there you go. Be an informed voter and hear what Mayor Panelides, Senator Astle, Gavin Buckley, and Nevin Young have in store for Annapolis, if they win.
Live from a grungy kitchen table located in Annapolis, Maryland's scenic and historic capital, it's the Maryland Crabs Podcast. With each episode, your hosts, Tim Hamilton, John Fernay, and the occasional guest will dive in and pick apart the stuff that really matters most to you. We're too lazy to actually solve any of these problems, but we can definitely stir the pot. From schools, politics, parking in the fire lane, to those horrible people who drive BMWs. And here with this week's episode, live from the kitchen table, Tim Hamilton and John Fernay.
Hey there, welcome back. It is the Maryland Crabs, and hopefully by this time you've had a chance to listen to last week's episode, which is all about the arts in Annapolis, and that was really fun. We had Frank DeVenti from Visit Annapolis and Ben Eisenberg from Symmetry Agency.
I almost hit him with my car today. We went out to lunch. I met Jared for lunch, and we went to Lemongrass, and he was walking by, and I almost hit him, and he looked up and kind of glared, but he didn't recognize it was me, so I'm not getting in here. So I just kept driving.
Oh my gosh, that's funny. But yeah, Arts Week is actually in full swing now when you're hearing this. It will continue for a few more days, and you've got the Wine and Arts Festival, which is going to be happening Saturday and Sunday at the Navy Marine Corps Stadium. That's it. And I do want to say congratulations to our winner, who won tickets to the Wine and Arts Festival.
That was Ted?
I forget who it was.
Judy?
No.
Marcus?
No.
Agamemnon?
What do you like, naming all the Mumfords?
I don't know what the Mumford is.
Mumford Sons?
You're just making that up.
Marcus and,
Is that Dungeons and Dragons?
I forget who the name was, but congratulations to them. Enjoy that. Sample all the wines that you have. But while you're over listening to that podcast over at Apple Podcasts, make sure you give us a rating. A 5-star rating would be wonderful. And leave us a review. Because
you know what, a 6th one would be better. What?
Leave us a review. Leave us 5 stars. Tell the world how much you like it. It does help us out, believe it or not, as Apple goes through their little mythical algorithms and everything else. So make sure you follow us, get us on there, and give us a review and a rating.
You can also find us on Facebook. We are very popular there. We got a group and a page, so follow us on both of those. You can also find us on Twitter. You can find John at Annapolis. Find me at Tim Hamilton 47. And, of course, we are at MD Crabs Podcast. You can also find us on info@the-Maryland-Crabs. That's where you can send us an email, and you can find us at themarylandcrabs.com.
Anywhere you get your podcast, we're probably right there. That's for sure.
And I'm still liking the Alexa thing. You know, it's
not Alexa's. Echo. Yeah,
but I mean, it's would you just say play Maryland Crabs, and boom, there we go.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. What's on tap this week?
Well, let's see. We're going to talk to Nevin Young. He is our 4th candidate for In Order. Our
4th and so far final.
Probably final candidate for the mayoral election in November. And he was an interesting guy because he's kind of the dark horse, first of all. He came out of nowhere. We didn't know who Nevin was. Everyone else, we knew who they were. So he was a little bit of a mystery. And we sat down with him a few days ago just to talk about the race in general, his vision for Annapolis.
Let's hear what Nevin has to say. And we're here with Nevin Young, not to be confused with Kevin Young, because I don't know who Kevin Young is, but it's funny. My phone always will autocorrect to Kevin when I type Nevin. Probably because I haven't typed it much. But Nevin Young, who is the Republican candidate for mayor for the city of Annapolis, and we are in the midst of an election season right now.
And you're kind of a dark horse because the other three candidates so far are very high profile in their own right. You have an incumbent mayor who was unknown before he became mayor, so that brings notoriety. And then we have a state senator, and we have a business owner who's very colorful. So you are the dark horse candidate.
Well, Gavin is a very colorful character. I think it would be expected the others already holding office would have some name recognition.
So you're the mystery, but there is an advantage to being a mystery candidate.
Well, you don't want to give them any ideas they don't already have.
Well, yeah, but Batman, he was a mystery.
But I've never run for office before. This comes about, I had actually thought about running in 2013. I thought at that time...
For what? Mayor?
For mayor. I thought at that time what a lot of people thought at that time, which is that Josh Cohen would probably be reelected, that there probably wasn't a lot of point in running against him. But the other thing...
That was our version of the national election, by the way.
Yeah. But
that election.
The thing you observe over the years, is when Bill Clinton, for example, threw in his hat in 92, everybody said this is a warm-up for 96. George Bush the elder has a 91% approval rating. The Democrats are toast this election cycle. So everybody said that, right? They said this is just a parade of candidates who all want to run when George Bush the elder finishes his second term.
And then Ross Perot came.
So what we learned is that if you think something's right to do, then you should probably just go ahead and do it despite the odds, because you never know what'll happen in the year or two leading up to something.
And where's your accent from? I'm detecting the accent.
I have a Maine accent that has been beaten into submission by 20 years in Maryland.
Yeah, we're accentless here, unless you're in Baltimore. Unless you're in Baltimore.
Growing up, I had a very pronounced Yankee accent, and I've worked...
You can't get that from here.
I haven't worked hard to get rid of it, but it happens naturally over time as you speak to people and, you try to work into their comfort zone. I think naturally your accent tends to soften.
Or you have a few drinks. Yeah.
Well, no, that's when it comes roaring back. But anyway, so I almost ran in 2013 and probably should have. What I think happened in 2013 is Mike Panelides came out with his slogan of Sweep Annapolis Clean, right? And so I'm sitting there thinking, well, what does that really mean? Because we're not saying everybody's out there taking bribes and everybody's, it's not like Chicago backroom politics necessarily. What I think it meant, and it's something...
Wait a minute, he was ahead of his time. That was the first drain the swamp.
Right, but
look at that. Wait a minute.
But I think what had happened really is that people had become fed up with a bureaucratic culture that wasn't responsive to them.
Sure.
That they felt was autocratic, that was making up its own rules as it went along, that wasn't really, they couldn't figure out how to deal with City Hall.
And that's a reputation that Annapolis has, and whether that's deserved or not, I don't know. But every city has that.
I have a client who came out and did some HVAC work for me, and I was talking to him about, running for mayor, and he said, he didn't say he would never do a job in Annapolis again, in the city of Annapolis, but he said he would think twice before he ever did a job here again.
From countless people just saying that it's just the most dysfunctional city to do business in.
And he said he had a HVAC installation. He went back to get his permit signed off on, and they said, "Oh, sorry, the guy's on vacation." And he said, "Well, there's got to be somebody else, right?" No. So what do I do? And they say, you can't do anything until he comes back. It's going to be 2 weeks.
Right, so can't bill out the job, can't get paid.
Can't get paid. You've got and I don't know if it was a homeowner or a general contractor, or whether it was a new job or a remodel, but he said, people are yelling at me, why can't I get turned on and get this thing running?
Because Carl's on vacation.
Because somebody's on vacation. And so you kind of sympathize with what happens to the average citizen who tries to deal with the city, and we've all had probably some negative experiences trying to get things done.
Do you think that's endemic to Annapolis, or do you think that's most cities have that bureaucracy?
I think the price of responsive bureaucracy is constant vigilance. If you just let things be, if you just think you're going to let them run themselves in a city government, it will fall into this sort of state of self-service rather than being responsive to what the citizens need.
True, but again, is that Annapolis, or is that also...
That's almost any city that doesn't have the right
But do you think
feedback
we're worse than most,
that,
or do you think that we're about where most cities are?
When you say worse than most, are we comparing Annapolis to D.C. or to Baltimore, or are we comparing us to Rockville or to...
No, not Rockville. Would still dwarf us. Like, let's say Frederick or Salisbury or Cumberland.
I think that you would probably have an easier time dealing with a lot of those city governments, but obviously I don't have the type of experience dealing with those.
Where is your background? I mean, what's your background? You're not, obviously you've never run for office, so
no, I grew up in Maine. I first came to Annapolis in 1992 to go to St. John's College.
You're one of those.
Oh, yeah, you did.
And
we just talked to Chris Nelson last week.
Oh, yeah?
Great guy.
Final hurrah. What an awesome dude.
He was, I think, in his first or second year there as president when I started there.
So, so you're younger than I am.
5 years ago. Well, I don't know how old you are, but...
I'm 30.
You're lying.
So he started in 91. So
91 or 92.
92.
Yeah. So you are younger than I am. Oh,
well, no, I was 22 at the time, I think. So
sort of the same age.
Okay.
So you went to St. John's.
I went to St. John's.
Got your law degree. Just like Chris Nelson did.
I didn't. Chris Nelson is a former lawyer.
Yeah.
Or he is, once a lawyer, always a lawyer, right? Even disbarred lawyers, they say they're lawyers. So I didn't go straight through. I ended up leaving and going to Boston, and I worked as an electronics technician and engineering technician. That was during the 90s when the boom was really happening. And it wasn't until 99 that I decided, although this is lucrative, it's a dead end because you kind of top out at a certain point in your career as a technician. And so I went back to St. John's and then went to law school in the evening at GW and graduated in 2005 from George Washington University. And I've been practicing here since then. For 10 years with Krause and Ferris, which is on Duke of Gloucester Street.
Okay.
I don't know if you know Lynn Krause or Bill Ferris.
It's a green building.
It's a brick building.
It's a random answer.
It's a brick building with probably, I believe the trim is green.
Is it rumored to be haunted?
There's a rumor that it's haunted.
Okay.
It used to be a boarding house for the Naval Academy prep school, I think.
Okay.
And there's a rumor that it's haunted because when they bought the building and they were moving in, the story is a man was up on the third floor installing a light fixture, and he got off the ladder, left his tools, left his ladder, said, "I'm never coming back to this building," and he was gone. And he had to send somebody else, his son or somebody, to come get his tools. And he said he saw a woman in a black robe just sort of float from one room to the other, and then when he went to see what was going on, she wasn't there, and that he was sure it was a ghost. But
interesting.
I'm not a big believer in ghosts.
Right.
But he saw something, whether it was an optical illusion or something. But they say it's haunted. But
so you got 25 years in Annapolis, and been watching the machines gears move for a while, and then decided to.
Well, yeah. I think what happened was in 2013, people responded to a pledge to sweep the city clean, which I think they interpreted as we're going to change the culture of the city government. We're going to bring in people who will actually make the city listen to the citizens, and it's going to be polite and friendly and all of the things that people didn't feel they were getting. I think what we've seen really is 4 years later, they don't feel like they got that. Mm-hmm. They saw a few firings in key positions. Obviously, we know who those people were. But they haven't seen a real response in changing the bureaucratic culture. And they've also seen a series of snafus and missteps in the police department in terms of responsibility. We've had numerous lawsuits. You're aware of those probably. Right. We had an officer alter an arrest warrant after the fact to cover up what I call a false arrest. We had the issue with the fight that happened at the Federal House. Are you familiar with the Shriner lawsuit? There was an allegation in that case that a couple of Maryland Transportation Authority cadets who were working security at the Federal House beat somebody up there, and then an Annapolis officer who knew that wasn't quite the real story he was being told, charged the victims with crimes to cover up for his buddies. And then the videotape at the restaurant showed the real story, which was that they were in the wrong and had assaulted these patrons. That ended up in a civil rights case, which I believe was settled. I'd have to double check, but it was called Schreiner versus City of Annapolis.
Oh, you said Shriners. I thought it was the guys in the little cars with the fez caps.
No clown hats, although, there's a tempting analogy to draw. But so what we've seen is, several incidents. There was also the police dispatcher who pulled another police dispatcher's personal information. Do you remember when that happened?
Yeah.
And that was supposed to be investigated, and that died on the vine somewhere, right? So what we see is a city government that seems to be perpetually not cleaning its own nest. They have the same few bad apples whose names keep turning up over and over again. And rather than do something about it, their response is to circle the wagons and, keep themselves out of trouble. So I think people see that. They can't help but notice it. They can't help but say, I as a lawyer can't help but say, if I went and altered something a judge had signed after the fact to make my job easier, I would be disbarred, or I'd at least be in serious trouble.
Right.
And people, the average citizen, can't understand why they should put their trust in a department that lets an officer do that and get away with it. And when they see time after time things happen that people aren't enforcing discipline from within, they say, what's wrong? What's the point in trying to engage democratically and be good citizens when one of the phrases I coined as part of this campaign is, if you want people to respect the law has to respect the people, right? And what people feel is the law and the government is not respecting them by dealing with them honestly and transparently.
Do you feel that this is something that's been going on for a long time, or has it been accelerated with the last administration?
It seems to have picked up speed because we've had several incidents in the last few years. Maybe it just wasn't as well reported on because of we're all on Facebook now, and we're all on.
I think that has a lot to do with it.
So I can say that what's become public, to my knowledge, seems to have picked up speed. There may have been more of it before, but people did a better job of keeping it on the down low. But either way, this is a constant disease of most governments, that without constant vigilant supervision, they descend into the iron cage of bureaucracy, right, is what we've heard it called. The key is not to fire a few people in key positions. The solution is to actually have transparency, which is, for instance, the White House had a very interesting idea about having a petition site for whitehouse.gov, sure. Right? And obviously you wouldn't need 1,000 signatures in the city of Annapolis, but if 20 or 40 or 50 citizens all signed a petition saying, we'd like to know what the mayor thinks about this, there needs to be a response. There's no reason we cannot, in today's digital age, actually have responsive government, in that it doesn't mean I'm going to accept any bad idea that comes down the pike, but it does mean if enough people think something to suggest it.
It's an interesting concept. Have you always been a Republican?
No.
No.
I believe party loyalty is really a foolish thing.
Personally, I don't think party has anything to do in a local election.
It shouldn't, but it does.
Right.
I was talking to a former mayor of Baltimore 2 or 3 weeks ago, and
come on, name names, drop it. Schmoke.
Yes,
okay.
And
he nodded yes.
He lives in my neighborhood. He lives in my neighborhood.
Yeah, no.
And what he said, he always said when he was mayor of Baltimore, was that there's no Republican or Democratic way to fill a pothole. And local government, it shouldn't matter, other than people have this tribal mentality. Other than that, it shouldn't matter what sort of Republican or Democrat you are, or independent. It's an unfortunate fact of our political life that the system we built favors people who ally themselves with one party or other in terms of actually getting elected.
Well, it does leak into it. I mean, I can think of right off the bat, City Council, we had one meeting when they talked about moving the election onto in par with the national election, and a Democratic council person said, well, no, we benefit from the system. The Democrats Democrats benefit from the system, why move it? And on the other hand, I saw when they were looking to relieve the mayor of 1 or 2 assistants or something like that for the budget, you had the lone Republican said, well, this is because he's a Republican. And that's where you just want to just shake all of them and say, this is such nonsense at this level.
It's not about being a Democrat or a Republican. I'm surprised they admitted that.
They did on camera.
That it benefits them. But it's not about being a Democrat or a Republican. It's about being incumbent or in place versus, because a higher turnout usually people who are less politically involved, and therefore they might not have the same affinities or loyalties in terms of who I'm going to vote for this year. And usually the people who turn out reliably are more likely to vote for incumbents.
All right, so let me ask you, so this kind of begs the question, so you switched your party affiliation. Was there a reason for that? Was it a strategic reason, or was it ideological? Or
I was unaffiliated for a long time. I was a Democrat to vote for a friend in the primaries, and then I switched to Republican to run in this race. The truth is, the way our system is designed, the voters benefit, I think, more from a binary choice on each side of the aisle rather than, when Gavin was the only announced candidate for mayor, I thought about running as a Democrat. Then when John Assel said, I'm running too, I say, okay, here's a situation where I could jump into this have 3 people running as Democrats. 2 of them split the vote, and then the least, if you had ranked voting, who would have been the least popular candidate ends up winning.
It's like a parliamentary election.
Like a parliamentary sort of thing. Or you can give the voters 2 choices on the Democrat side and 2 choices on the Republican side, and then you at least know that on each side you're getting the person who is favored by the people on that side. That still leaves a whole bunch of people out, all of the unaffiliated voters, but it's the best we can do, I think.
See, I'm an unaffiliated voter, and here's my problem when you talk about the national elections. This is just a pet peeve. I can't vote in the primary, and you have to say, well, then why don't you join one of the political parties? And I'm like, well, then why don't you stop using taxpayer money to pay for primary elections?
I've often said the same thing.
Because they're 2 private organizations.
We've known for a long time, there have been a lot of lawsuits, almost perversely, saying you can't have open primaries, which have always failed in other states where Republicans and Democrats have sued and said, keep these outsiders out of our primaries because they're not in our party and we're a private club.
Right.
And the response from the court has always been, yeah, but you'd use public facilities.
Exactly. That's my point too.
Public funds. And I think the only pure way to do this is the caucus system, where private parties actually set up in people's private event centers or living rooms. Even in small towns in Maine, they still have caucuses in people's living rooms. Because why should the state pay taxpayer money to favor, just because I have more than 5% of the electorate in my camp, right? Then,
well, that's when the Republicans that's one of their things with Hillary Clinton saying, well, she got the answers to the debate questions or the questions ahead of time, but that was in the Democratic primary. What do you care? It's none of your business, and it's none of my business as an independent who they put out in front of me. I don't care if it's Bernie or Hillary.
It's your business when the Democrats are using, or Republicans are using
public money. That's my problem too. Yeah, don't use my tax money for it.
Or when people are saying that there's a supposedly independent commission that sets up presidential debates, and they're
right. Yeah, they're the only 2, because the only thing that the 2 parties can agree on is that they don't want a third party. Because we go back to Perot, the example you put out in the beginning, and well, let's go back. I mean, John got us off track here. Let's go back to the city election.
Okay, I think the city elections do need to be moved to coincide with either the gubernatorial or presidential election. That may be a little bit of a trick timing wise, because you probably can't alter your term during an election.
Well, they tried to do that,
but you could say
years ago.
But you could say the next time after the next election, it'll be one short cycle or one long cycle, and then
And actually, that does benefit the Democrats, because it's Democrats they don't come on the off year elections. They come on the midterm elections. They come out for presidential elections. So I mean, this would benefit the Democratic Party.
But it's not really the point. I mean, I'm not saying.
I'm just saying that was the objection before of not moving it, is because it would be a disadvantage to the Democrats. I don't see how that's possible.
Well, so you avoided a 3-way primary on the Democratic side, and you jumped into an incumbent primary,
right?
And I mean, there's certain power in incumbency. just that. I mean, do you feel that Mayor Panelides is beatable? I mean, what got him? What do you feel got him elected? And then how do you feel that he can be beat?
Because it was a crazy election.
I think what got him elected was, one, he had a lot of publicity on an idea, a central idea or theme of sweeping Annapolis clean,
right.
Which was, as I said, I think it wasn't obviously about actual corruption. It was about changing a culture that people responded to. And I think what they'd seen with Josh Cohen, who I personally think was a fine fellow, and I don't have any grudges against him or anything.
Guy. He's a friend of the podcast.
But I think what they saw was that he wasn't really in touch with the changes needed in the city government. That doesn't mean we've had them subsequently, but they said, you know what? I go down to City Hall and I'm not treated well, and I don't feel like they're using my money well, and I don't feel like they listen to me, and I feel like most people, when they get frustrated with the political process, it's because they feel like the rudder's disconnected from the helm. They don't feel like they have any input or say other than at the ballot box, and that's what we saw.
Yeah, so, you also throw in a little bit of Bevan Buchheister as a primary opponent, and they
Save Annapolis.
A little bit of
a lot of Save Annapolis.
Save Annapolis, and
they disappeared.
Ed Hartman's opposition to that, a little dash of Ordan, and his idea for 110 compromise, and there was 52 was it? He won by 54 votes.
Very, very slim margin. And also, we don't have much, we were just talking about, we don't have much turnout in the mayoral
election. It doesn't take much.
No, the high school gets more votes than a prom and king and queen of prom in the city.
I think there were 1,200 Republicans who voted.
I'd like to take all the money that people spend on the elections and find out what it costs per person or per vote, what it actually comes down to.
That's crazy.
I bet you it's close to like $50 per vote.
Well, it's almost like they'd be better off buying votes with it, right?
Exactly. So let's get back to so we're looking at city government. So I think we're taking a very broad view of the inefficiency of city government, which is, I guess people would argue, especially Republicans would argue, that that's the problem with all government, is that by nature it's inefficient. And we may be as bad or worse than other places, but are you looking at the inefficiencies of the government? My pet peeve is I think our city government is way bloated, way too big. Is it a combination of all those things? It
probably doesn't run as efficiently as it could. Not having been an insider in this city government, I'm not going to swear up and down that that's the case, but I know just from my observation of these types of institutions in general, there usually is a lot of waste. In my military career, I worked side by side with federal employees, and I saw that a lot of people did nothing all day, and a lot of people did full-time jobs all day. The rule of 80-20, I think is what they used to call it.
80% to 20% to 80% of the work.
Right. Yeah. So, and we just saw this morning an article about the auditor proposal and the independent counsel proposal for the council. I think an auditor should really kind of go without saying, at least as an advisory position and as a monitor.
Yeah, I noticed that the mayor took opposition to the thought of having an independent auditor in there, and I didn't quite see why, because, I mean...
Well, I think the point was, and I had trouble understanding why, too, that it was weaken the position of mayor. I mean, they tried to do that, the council tried to do that right after he was elected.
It doesn't lessen his power unless, by lessening power, you mean actually increasing transparency.
No, it doesn't. I mean, we've got a weak mayor system. He's just another vote on the council, is all he is. And
there's all kinds of executive powers, though.
Right. I mean, he sets the agenda, and he can,
and he can fire and hire people,
paid for that and whatnot. But I don't see where an auditor weakens his office in any.
Why don't we explain the auditor position to me, frankly? Because I mean, I was reading that, and I kind of got the gist of it, but I didn't understand exactly what his objection was. Number one,
I thought that from my understanding, I think the position would be simply to review expenditures and make recommendations and reports on what money's being used for and whether they could improve how that money's being used, which didn't seem to me. But to an executive, probably that is, here's just another person to nip at my heels, right? Here's just another critic, and another critic can't help me.
Or someone who would putting the budget together absolutely onerous.
Right, and so you have to actually give due consideration to how you're spending money, which I think is a good thing in a public entity. The other one is the independent counsel for the city council, and I think that's even more important because we've seen several issues where the city council needs legal advice. But think about it this way: if the mayor has a certain position on something, and the mayor has a city attorney who serves at his pleasure, and he wants the city attorney to take a certain position, can the council really count on what the city attorney is telling them, or should they?
True.
Or should they have independent?
That's legit.
My
question would be: how
in
often
private
does
practice we'd call it a conflict of interest?
Yeah, I mean, how often does the city council need? And again, I don't know. Need the advice of an independent attorney?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I think it's more than we think.
As opposed to be able to have a budget to hire an independent attorney when needed.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Well, my impression was it wasn't a full-time position, but was a retained outside
Okay.
counsel.
Oh, so that's what you're thinking then.
fine.
It could be done either way, but it might be cheaper in certain circumstances to just have an in-house attorney. It depends how much they use it, obviously.
Right.
So anyway, those were issues that I thought were interesting in terms of trying to cut waste out of the government and eliminate some ongoing problems which we might be having, which is we see all of these. I mean, I've read the budgets and things for the city, but you see, okay, $8 million for this department, but that doesn't tell you where is it being spent, and are they spending $90 on a shovel? And
they changed it to the project type of thing, and I disagree with it as opposed to the line item, because you just sort of lumps it in and says, okay, this is what I need for this.
What was the rationale behind that? It just kind of because it would handcuff them.
They said
as far
it's easier. It's easier to.
Well, sure, it's easier.
And
yeah.
I don't. I think you lose a lot of accountability with it. It's a lot easier to pass through and look through, but you can also hide a lot of things.
Well, it's like back when the military changed from the GSA catalog being the exclusive supplier for a lot of things to local purchase authorizations, right? Mm-hmm. You had, all of a sudden, you had market forces at work that would help bring prices down in many cases, but you also had a lot less accountability in terms of, is this guy just going into town and giving business to his buddy when they don't even need the stuff that they're buying?
Mm-hmm. Well, I know the city. I looked for the where the funding was for the downtown Annapolis partnership, and nobody could tell me specifically where, but it was in the lump sum with the mayor's budget.
That's sister. I don't think anyone could ever find that sister city fund either. That was around $70,000
so that's,
a year.
Again, there's different things. What else are we running on, Nevin?
We've seen a lot of concern about development.
Yeah, no, we'll go head to head. We've gone head to head on Facebook a little bit on this.
But right now, I guess we're up in the air on the Lofts project as of today,
or the Eastport Landing.
It's called the Lofts at Eastport.
Is it the Loft? No. The Lofts are down at Chesapeake and Fort.
Oh wait. Okay, I thought it was officially called the Lofts at Eastport Landing.
Is it? Okay.
Something like
Could
that.
Be.
I think the Lofts is up.
From the one at the shopping center.
The one at the shopping center. Okay. I personally think that development as proposed is way out of character for the neighborhood. A lot of people disagree with me. That's fine. But now we see, and here's the frustrating thing. We were talking about this before we started rolling on the, I guess we don't roll tapes anymore.
No. Yeah. Everyone calls it tapes now. Everyone calls it tapes now.
Yeah.
Trump says he better not. He's taping people.
Yeah. Now, but before we started recording here, we were talking briefly about this, that although I'm opposed to the project, I can't help but sympathize with the developers who put out, according to them, and this seems high to me, even knowing what's involved, but they very well may have, $1 million, which means they probably had an absolutely complete architectural plan here for everything to be done, down to the.
Well, I don't know. I don't know where they stand as far as the financial thing with the owner of the shopping center, because I know that they were taking an interest in it. Mm-hmm. Did they buy? Have they already purchased that?
Did they have to option it? In other words, if the project we'll give you X now, and then if the project goes forward,
right. So who knows what it was, but
and also we have to remember all these people say that you're getting paid by them, John. Right?
Well, John is.
Right. That's a joke for the record.
No, it's true.
John's been routinely accused on Facebook of being on the take from the.
That's because I get people to do that. It just cracks me up.
But anyway, so here you have a developer, to get back to the original point, who's spent about $1 million in reliance on what they've been told, apparently, by planning and zoning. And now they're being told, well, that may not be the case. We don't know yet whether, where the decision will fall on the number of units allowable, or whether they'll end up in court over it. But now they're being told that may not be the case at all. They've already said the project wouldn't be economically feasible at anything less than what. Although I'm a little skeptical of that claim, but economically feasible meaning what?
No, I think you have a right to be skeptical of that.
Because nobody who's a good business person would design a project to be
at the bare
bare bones of what they could make money on.
For sure.
So But now you have a problem where they're at a stop. This might end up in court. Planning and zoning might pick the ball back up. We don't know what's going to happen. But we know that if it doesn't go forward in any form, these guys are out $1 million when they put that money out relying on what the city had told them. And while I've cautioned many a client, you're not going to have any recourse if you take a public servant's word for something and they turn out to be wrong.
Well, and that's been the complaint. I'm not going to just say of the Crystal Springs folks that they've constantly complained that the bar keeps getting moved. And my point was also that they came in with a different plan initially. But I've heard that from business owners who say that that's one of the critical points is that they're always told one thing, and then when it comes down to being inspected or they're told another.
Well, and Crystal Springs is an interesting one because we've heard before the Sierra Club had a recommendation or a letter that they had put forward, and they felt like they had made a lot of the changes that were requested, to get rid of the commercial, or I should say just sort of the open end of the project and just do the assisted living or the retirement community.
Right.
And I actually talked to, I wish I had a firm position on it right now, but I actually called Courtney Malengo's one of the PR people for the Lutheran communities, and I asked for anything that she had to share on environmental stuff and stormwater control and on what the present traffic studies were and things, and they didn't really seem to have anything new to share with me that's come out.
Well, I think because that can's been kicked down the road by the city so much,
and so it's interesting in that. And here's where it becomes difficult. And you'd like to just take a firm position and say, no, 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 or yes, 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 let's do this. But here's where it becomes difficult, is if this doesn't go in this form, either the developer is going to get frustrated and go to court, or they're going to sell the property and whoever buys it is going to go to court. Then you're going to have one of, how many are there, 13 or 14 now, I forget. One of these judges on the circuit court is going to decide what's reasonable and what's a taking, given the size of the parcel and given the surrounding area and so forth and so on. What is a regulatory taking if you just say we don't want you building there?
Well, we'd taken a little bit of heat over Crystal Springs. I don't know if you heard the show that we did a couple weeks ago, but we took some heat because I had called out the environmentalists who were opposed to this, and I painted them all with a broad brush, when in fact I meant the small group that is opposing this, and it is a small group because the South River Federation made a separate piece and with the developer, and they were fine with what was going to affect their area of interest. But the others were, my problem with them was that, and there was essentially 5 people, but my problem was that they were absolutely uncompromising. And to your point, my point always was that, look, you're going to get to a point where they're going to sue, and they're going to take it to court, and then they're going to build what they're going to build despite your objections, and then you've lost any gains that you could have made through good faith compromise and negotiation.
And my fear here is that if it goes to court, it'll end up being just an apartment development or just a townhouse development straight up, right? A whole bunch of townhouses or a whole bunch of condos or a whole bunch of whatever, but you won't have any of the sort of input over the stormwater control anymore that you would have had prior. In terms, you won't have the same input over open space preservation, over planned set-asides for, and they do have set-asides in their plan now. Then you also have the consideration that, do we want Annapolis to have jobs, or do we want Annapolis to be a bedroom community for other places? Because if you just do a townhouse development, people who work at Fort Meade or who work in D.C. or who work wherever will move in there, right? And they'll be leaving every morning at 7:30, and the same traffic we're worried about now is going to happen. If it were the proposed development, you might see jobs for healthcare people, for maintenance people, for food service
retail,
people, for, and we've got 2 of the poorest wards in the city right across the street, basically, in terms of needing that type of job creation, and instead people are commuting to Baltimore to go to work, right? And this seems like people would be interested in the job creation that could come from it and the boost to local retail around the area that could come from it.
Yeah, but my problem is that sometimes that those jobs are assumed. Like if you went to the developers at Crystal Spring, they'll give you a number, but that number, a lot of that's based on construction. And always my thing is, what are those jobs guaranteed to go to city residents? Otherwise, you can get people from outside the city.
Put construction aside, because any development's going to have construction.
But even so,
any development's going to have construction.
I mean, how many?
If you have a retirement community be with, and I know now I'm sounding like an advocate. I'm not. I'm just trying to present both sides.
He's wearing a Crystal Spring T-shirt, folks. Right
no,
there.
No. It's my necktie that says in big letters down it. I'm just trying to present both sides fairly.
Well, they're only going to hear one side.
Put aside the construction jobs, because any project's going to have construction jobs, and we know they'll only last until the thing's built, and then they'll pack up and go away.
And most of them won't be local.
And a lot of them will be contractors from D.C. and Baltimore and even further away, right? And but whatever that is, we have a baseline because the Lutheran communities have built other places in other. They have similar communities in other areas, in Rockville and
Northern Virginia and DC.
Things. So we know that retirees are going to need people to clean for them, to cook for them, to do the maintenance for them, and to provide health care when they become to a point where they move into the higher levels.
Right, so they continue to the care.
And we also know that most of those jobs, and I don't want to stereotype, but most jobs of that type start early if you're on first shift.
Right.
And then the second shift is usually you're looking at 6 to 3 and 3 to 11 and things like that. So I'm wondering if the traffic concerns, if you've got for lack of a better term, an old folks home with service workers coming early in the day, isn't that better than letting it someday be a townhouse project where we have little input and it doesn't create any jobs for us?
Well, I think the traffic concerns, and I'm looking at the current plan that they have, I think they've kind of alleviated a lot of the issues I had with traffic. But if you had an Harris Teeter's there, which would have been cool in that respect, but you had all those other places, I think there was going to be a traffic issue. But like I see, we have how many assisted living on Forest Drive right now? 1, 2.
I mean,
3
complexes?
Yeah, 4, something like that. And they don't contribute traffic. So, I mean, I'm not a cheerleader either. Matter of fact, I still have my issues with it. But the traffic has lessened. The issues with the traffic and the schools have lessened significantly since they've
What are the issues you have with it right now?
Well, I mean, right now, I still have some environmental, despite being called out for it. But also, I guess I just have a basic mistrust for, we've talked to these developers, and, you expect them to be foaming at the mouth with fangs, and they're all really nice guys. They're good gentlemen and what have you. But, I mean, I have just seen a bait and switch, which is unfair of me to put that on to the developers. I will say that.
No con man will ever come up and greet you by kicking you in the shin.
But here's
that's what I can tell you.
But here's what I'm going to say, though, is that I learned, what do they call it? Infill. That was the phrase I learned when we talked to the folks who are doing the Eastport, right, was the infill development, which is you're taking, blighted or otherwise unused, previously developed properties, and you're renovating them. That, to me, makes sense, opposed to looking Crystal Spring.
It's redevelop versus develop.
But the difficulty there is a project of the size they're trying to do, there is no real infill that I can think of.
No, that's my problem. Now that's why I don't have a problem per se with the Eastport column. And we had we've had minor disagreements with some people we're friends with in Eastport, and their contention was, you don't live here and you're making a judgment. But
I don't live on Forest Drive.
Yeah, exactly. But that was I'm like, it does affect us.
Can't have it both ways.
I go through there 5, 6 times a day round trips.
Right.
So that's probably up to between 6 and 10 trips through that area. Right. So it's not that I never go through there. I'm there throughout the day, every day, and I understand how it's built. So when people talk about the traffic there, they're like, it's hellacious already. It is not. I'm sorry, it's not. If you're trying to make a left turn from Watergate onto Bay Ridge, yes, it sucks. But that's one little intersection, and I don't care if people get mad. The traffic there is not hellacious. So
it can be in certain times, but only if there's a
you are never
problem.
like banging your steering wheel unless the drawbridge is up. Unless there's an accident.
I think the extra volume from the landings project would have created problems on Chesapeake.
Now, they gave us the numbers, and they said it added like one car. I forget it was.
Now it was like 10 an hour or something like that. It wasn't significant.
That does not, per hour is not the same as per in critical windows of time
during the rush hour.
No, and that's a good point. Yeah.
I'll tell you, we need to wait to see where that ends up.
The figure we kept hearing bandied about was it'll add 50 cars between like 7 and 9 a.m. on Bay Ridge Avenue. That doesn't mean that's 50 cars on Chesapeake and then going out over the bridge, right? Which is going to be the other favored route. So there's a sort of some... And look, this is part of salesmanship, but developers sell their project by cherry-picking things that sound good. What's going to win this race?
What's going to win the race for you?
We haven't talked about some of the other visions that I've got in terms of improving the government.
Well, one thing we do want to come back and revisit all the candidates again. And we are also looking, and we're trying to iron down a date and a place, but we're going to do a Facebook Live debate forum with all 4 candidates, unless there's a 5th one that jumps in.
What's going to win this race is, I think people are disappointed with the performance of the incumbent over the last 3 years for reasons that I've already discussed about accountability, transparency. There have been some personality clashes that we haven't talked about. I think the exchange with Jared Littman was pretty bad. I don't think a lot of people were impressed with it. There's been other things similar to that. There's a note, the famous note from early on. Yeah, it almost is tempting to make a campaign flyer with it, but I think I'll refrain from that.
But are you prepared to get dirty if it needs to?
I don't have a problem with people engaging in honest criticism, and all I would ask is that if people are going to be critical, that they be honest. I think a lot of people twist facts to suit them, and that's something I'm pledged not to do. Okay. Is not to ever misstate or weasel word or do the sort of loose treatment of the facts that we see in a lot of political races.
Admirable, sure.
If I say something, it's going to be defensibly true. It's not going to be conjecture or rumor or innuendo. On the Democratic side, I've met with Gavin. I don't know him well. I went over when I announced that I was running. I went over just to see what he was about and how.
It's such a nice political race. Gavin, when he decided he was going to run, went into the mayor's office and told him.
Yeah, and
Gavin will send you flowers.
He said, look, we're both the outsiders here. How do we not hurt each other while we're discussing what issues and ideas we have during these upcoming primaries? Gavin's a good guy. I think he is focused on a certain couple of issues, the arts district and the downtown and business issues, and I think he's going to have a hard time beating John Astle in the primary. Gavin, if you're listening, I'm sorry, but John's got huge name recognition, if nothing else. And John's also a very nice fellow. I first met him, I think, 10 or 15 years ago at the Smoke Shop on Maryland Avenue, and I've seen him in there a number of times. They're closed now, of course.
Right.
But John's a great guy with a great service record and, all that. But I think people are going to say to themselves, he's been in the state Senate now for many years in the State House, and they're really looking for a change from the status quo. And I think to them, whether John thinks it's true or not, I think to them, voting for John will be a vote for the status quo.
All right, so is it fair to say that on the Democratic side, you think that Gavin is not going to have the broad support needed to win it? I think John, and then so that would give it to John. Then going into the general election, I think that our current mayor does not have the backing because of the transparency and everything else that you have, and that you going against John Astle, that John is the status quo.
It'll be a tough race. I think it'll be tough to beat John because he has a huge organization behind him. He has a lot of money. He has a lot of name recognition. He has a very.
He doesn't have a lot of money right now, unless he's raised. And I learned that you can't take your state money.
He will.
And put it. Oh, I'm sure he will. He's got a machine. He definitely has a machine. The mayor has. The current mayor has.
He's raised a lot of money too.
$175,000 or $200,000 at this point. So that's really good. But that's a really good start. Now, what? As far as raising money, obviously we need money to win a race. How do we get in touch with you? What do we want to do for you? I mean, I know you're on Facebook, which you Nevin Young for mayor.
I am, and within the next week, we're going to have electronic donations set up. I need to make sure that we're doing it correctly in terms of the campaign finance laws and making sure that there aren't any prohibitions on using certain platforms or, making sure that we can hook up the actual Nevin Young for mayor account to the right sources and things. I'm not tech savvy. My campaign manager is a full-time tech person. So, she will probably be setting this up for me.
Okay. And do you have a website yet, or is it?
That's also in the
that's
works.
all in there. Okay.
The last few weeks, as you know, have been hectic for me. I had to,
absolutely,
I ended up going to Maine because my mother passed away.
Oh, I'm sorry.
A couple of weeks ago, and had to deal with all the stuff that comes out of that.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think by June 1st we'll be campaigning in full force. What will we do to win the race? We'll be knocking on the primary, we'll be knocking on every Republican door in Annapolis. That's the strategy for right now. People say, well, knock on every door, and I say, well, we have limited resources to devote.
At this point, we need to knock on the Republican door.
If we don't get through the primary
without an open primary,
then we've wasted a lot of shoe leather on talking to. No offense to all the Democrats and unaffiliated people out there.
Well, they've got more doors to knock on.
We're used to getting snubbed anyway.
The other thing is, although I think John will attract a lot of people to whatever campaign events he has, I don't think he's going to go out there and actually try to meet every voter out there this time around, because he's been around a long time. Sure. And he can probably invest his energies otherwise and so forth.
Well, I mean, he can take it or leave it. I mean, if he loses, he still has his Senate job too.
Right, for now.
That he doesn't have. I mean, he's got some challengers lining up for that as well.
And people are wondering about what's going to happen with that, which is a separate question, but
and he is vulnerable. I mean, he almost lost the last two elections, so that's very interesting. And I assume that you're going to be at all the forums and whatnot that are going to pop up. I know
it will depend on whether I think that it's something that I should be at. It's certain things strategically you're better off spending your energies elsewhere.
Now, the mayor did not show up to the Ward 1 event.
He did not.
Now, do you think that was his argument was that he's already the mayor, he's not a candidate?
That was the initial word that came out of his chief of staff, said he's not a candidate, he's the mayor, and that was his answer. But he did also have a prior engagement with the Parole Homeowners Association or something or other that was already there. Could it have been changed? I don't know.
I think he could have come to that event if he'd wanted to. I think what he did not want is to be exposed to criticism from three different sides as a matter of strategy, and to have to listen to three people say this is what you haven't done and this is what you should have done better and so forth.
Well, he's going to have to get used to that. And as will you, as will Gavin, as will
like I've said repeatedly, that if you want to be in charge of things, you're going to get blamed for things, fairly or not. That's just the way it is. If you're driving the boat, then people are going to blame you for things.
All right, well, for now, go to Facebook. Go to Nevin Young for Mayor. Check him out. He's got his smiling picture up there, but he's got his platform up there as well. The website will be coming up soon, and if that comes out before this launches, we'll make sure that it's in our show notes to have it on there. And Nevin Young, who is the Republican challenger to Mayor Mike Panelides in the 2017 mayoral race, has been here with us today. And the primary is in June.
Yeah, the primary is...
September. The June is the county one the following year.
Right.
So the primary is in September, with the general election in November, and we will have a new mayor in December.
Or we might have the same old mayor.
We might have the same. We have a new sign.
Let's not put the cart before the horse.
But thank you very much for coming out. I appreciate you taking a chunk of time out of the middle of your day. And I know we changed it, and it's been a while. Been a bit of a challenge to get together. Yep. And we are going to be getting together with everybody else again at least one more time before the election, probably after the primaries, I'm guessing. But we're going to do a four-way town hall meeting at some point, and stay tuned to learn out about that.
All right. In the meantime, you can find us on Facebook. We have a group, and we also have a page. You can find us at MD Krabs Podcast on Twitter. You can find me at Tim Hamilton 47 on Twitter, John at Annapolis on Twitter. You can friend us both on Facebook because we're friendly type. You can send us email at info@themarylandkrabs.com, and of course our website is themarylandkrabs.com. You can find our episodes, you can subscribe, you can leave a rating, or you can leave a comment, which we love, at Apple Podcasts, at Google Play, and we're also on Stitcher and everywhere else. And
if you want to talk to Nevin Young for Mayor at gmail.com is the email address right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And that was Nevin Young, candidate for mayor.
Yeah, interesting guy, certainly capable.
Yeah, he's, so he ran on principle. He ran pretty much not as a spoiler, but he just felt that no one should run unopposed. So that's why he switched his party affiliation from Democrat to Republican, and he switched his party affiliation from Independent to Democrat to vote for someone a friend of his in the primary, or primary.
I had heard, and I'm not sure I'm convinced of it after speaking with Nevin, that there was a candidate that was placed in the Republican primary strictly with no intention of winning, but strictly with the intention of spending down Mayor Panellides' war chest.
I guess you could, but I mean, he's, by all accounts, I've heard numbers from between 160 to 200 grand, and I don't know how much a primary is going to burn that. We have not heard from the candidates a lot in the way of specificity when it comes to their platforms. I mean, we've heard a bunch of kind of vague concepts. I think that Gavin's come the closest to a real platform in so much as that he really wants to put a lot of emphasis on business.
In business and the arts.
Exactly. So, I mean, but we have a lot.
And that was also prior to him losing his court case.
Exactly. So I think it's going to be, we're going to have to start kind of really nailing down what the candidates are really running on. And I think if you look at what Nevin said, that he felt that Mike Panellides really he was elected on the promise of sweeping Annapolis clean. And I don't know if I agree with that. I think, a lot of things happened with that election. I don't know how much the slogan or how much the sentiment behind it really mattered, but Nevin's contention really is that the promise was to sweep Annapolis clean, and it has not. Now, I think...
Well, what is sweep Annapolis clean?
Exactly. I mean, that's what I was about to say, is that...
if he meant fire everybody in City Hall and start from scratch, well, then that just was not realistic.
Well, and I think, we're very critical about Annapolis, the red tape and the bureaucracy that goes along with it, but I mean, I think we always have to remember, too, that that's not uncommon. That is fairly much the status quo. You're always going to have red tape and bureaucracy with a municipality, but it's just to what degree. So are we worse than most others? I believe we are, but I mean, are we a hell of a lot worse than most others? No, we're not. And I don't think you can ever disrupt bureaucracy. I don't think you can ever untangle all the red tape. I think we can do a much better job, but I think what Nevin believed was that was the promise on which Panellides ran, and he hasn't done that, that he hasn't eliminated a lot of that streamlining of government. Panellides might disagree, obviously, but apparently that's Nevin's starting point. What we're going to start to move towards, and everyone else is seeing, what exactly is their campaign, what is their foundations,
True.
And what are the promises they're going to make that's going to follow up.
Well, earlier this week, too, Senator Astle came proactively out with a press release saying that he was, if elected mayor, that he would fully support Paris Climate Accord.
Right. And so we're recording this about 24 hours before you're going to receive it, less than that. And so, as everyone knows at this time, we're withdrawing from the Paris Accord, and it's going to take 3 years to do that. And a lot of municipalities and large cities and even states are stepping up, even in Republican-held states. And
Not too many, but yeah. I mean, and it's interesting, the Republican states that have stepped up to that are typically blue states.
Well, yeah, and I got to say this before we get
into it. Maryland would certainly be one.
Yeah, but I would say, but what I would say is that I was reading the Capitol, and it was funny, the comments come out is that now it's become, as everything in our country has become, as a partisan divided issue, where you're seeing that people are saying, well, some municipalities and states are stepping up. And instead of going, oh, well, good for them, people are furious, going, how dare they, because it's seen as disloyal maybe to the president.
You're usurping, you're treasonous, and
it's ridiculous. If you want to follow it. Now, the debate is, what good does it do? Is there anything that can be done? But that's a question that was asked because John Astle stepped up and he said, that I support if mayor, we are going to support the principles of the Paris Agreement.
Right. And Gavin came out and said, oh yeah, me too.
Right. And Nevin said that he would not, actually.
He said that on a local level that if you read the treaty, there's nothing.
It's non-binding.
There's nothing that we can do as a city. It's giving money to poor nations. It's
right.
Controlling carbon emissions and everything else in factories, and we just can't do that.
Well, we can do the steps we could take are maybe symbolic. Right before we started recording, you and I were talking about the point of symbolism in politics, and is it really a waste of effort, right. Which I believe it is. Maybe I'm wrong with that. So this is going to be a hot election item for the special elections, for example,
Probably.
And the off-cycle elections.
Yeah.
Hey, by the way, real quick, did you ever listen to Stuff You Should Know, that podcast?
Yes.
All right, they had a really fascinating one about 3 or 4 weeks ago, which is about voter suppression. And so they said, how does voting suppression work? And they were talking about it mostly in context of the Republicans and how it is, they look at consultants to look at certain areas to see how African Americans or Latinos vote and what methods they use, and then they'll move to kind of make it difficult to do that. And then the second half, they said, we're not going to let the Democrats off the hook, because this is the way that they do it, is that Democrats push for off-cycle elections, especially in municipalities. Huh. And they said that the off-cycle elections are designed to exclude the Republican voters because they don't vote off-cycle, just like the Democrats don't vote in congressional elections.
I see how that might be at play here locally, so I'm going to go back and listen to that. I think that
I'm serious. It's an excellent that's stuff you should know, and how voter suppression works, but it's really, really interesting.
Yeah, I'll definitely go back and check that out. But speaking of voter suppression, we don't want any of that here in Annapolis or in the area, and we're going to give you a chance to be an informed voter on June 28th.
Yep, my dad's birthday, Mikey J.
You going to bring him in?
He's from New York, so I don't think he has any interest in this.
Well, the Maryland Crabs and Annapolis are going to be co-sponsoring a mayoral forum, and we do have commitments from all 4 candidates, Nevin Young, Mike Pantelides, John Astle, and Gavin Buckley. We're going to be at Ram's Head On Stage, which is not the bar, it's the big place next door. It has seating for 300. We will be recording it. We will be broadcasting it live on Facebook, both on the All Annapolis as well as the Maryland Crabs Facebook pages.
And I'm meeting with someone tomorrow about some pretty cool technology that we might be able to use to, for some good camera work and all that.
And we are soliciting questions. So if you've got a question, send us an email, info@themarylandcrabs.com, and we'll take a look at that. We're going to, we're limited by time. Doors will open at 6 o'clock. The shindig will get underway at about 7, and we figure we would be out of there by 9 at the latest.
And it's free.
And it is free. Ram's Head will have booze and food available for purchase.
I'm not buying that for you.
I'll buy you a soda. But it'll be a lot of fun. So please pass the word. Again, free Ram's Head Wednesday night, the 28th of June. Be there with us and all 4 of the mayoral candidates.
And don't forget to submit your questions. You can do it through info@themarylandcrabs.com, or you can send it to us through Twitter. You can send it through us on the Facebook page or the group, and we'll absolutely follow up on that. Again, we'd like to include all the questions, but we're not going to be able to do that because we don't want to keep people there all night. So
yeah, I had somebody on Reddit come up to me and says, well, I'd like to talk about that one interaction I had with the police officer 3.5 years ago. I think it was Corporal so-and-so. And I'm like, yeah, no.
Yeah, we got to narrow it down a little bit. But So there's that. And it's going to be fun.
Coming up next week, we've got some Navy stuff. And beyond that, we're looking at some high school stuff. And we'll have this Forum podcast and all sorts of good stuff.
It's going to be a busy summer. So, all right.
Like us, rate us, give us a star, and we'll see you next week.
This has been the Maryland Crabs Podcast with Tim Hamilton and John Fernay. Sure to follow them in all the regular places, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and online at themarylandcrabs.com. Take a moment to rate us on iTunes. Now, get the hell out of my kitchen. Seriously, go!
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.